It was a cold and rainy October night, and the city was enveloped in an ominous atmosphere. Sarah, an adventurous young thrill-seeker, was determined to make the night memorable. She had enlisted her friends, Emily and David, for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, an overnight stay in a secluded house they found on Airbnb. The ad was intriguing and a bit mysterious. It described an isolated country house situated on top of a hill surrounded by dense forest. The promise of total privacy and tranquility amidst nature aroused the curiosity of Sarah and her friends, who were looking for an escape from their hectic lives. As they approached their destination, the darkness of night enveloped the winding road that took them away from civilization. The rain fell at a steady pace, creating a melancholic aura. With every kilometer traveled, civilization seemed to gradually disappear, replaced by dense darkness. Finally, the house came into view, emerging from the shadows of the forest. It was an ancient building covered in ivy and with an appearance that evoked a distant past. The dim lights on the facade of the house looked inviting, despite its mysterious air. Sarah, Emily, and David exchanged excited glances, despite a hint of apprehension. The house looked like something out of a dark fairy tale, lit by a full moon that cast a ghostly light over the scene. The feeling of isolation was palpable, and the trio could barely contain their excitement about spending the night in this intriguing place. They approached the house and noticed the sound of the wind gently howling through the trees. The trees surrounding the house seemed to watch with silent eyes. Every board creaked beneath your feet, as if the house itself were alive, breathing with ancient secret stories waiting to be revealed. Sarah, Emily, and David entered the house, hoping for an exciting night. The old brass lamps cast a dim, yellowish light that gave the interior of the house an air of mystery. They settled in, laughing and joking, trying to distract themselves from the scary aura the house seemed to carry. As the night progressed, the house began to reveal its secrets. The sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the house created an unsettling symphony, and the wooden planks creaked beneath your feet, as if the house itself was breathing. It seemed as if the walls were guardians of an ancient and dark history, and every creak seemed to echo with unsettling stories from the past. The friends tried to have fun, having dinner by candlelight and laughing, but the house had other plans. Mysterious sounds began to echo through the dark corridors. Indistinct whispers that seemed to dance in the shadows. They looked at each other nervously, attributing the noises to their imagination and the frightening surroundings. However, the feeling that they were not alone in the house persisted. An aura of uneasiness hung in the air, like a whispered promise that something was wrong. Every noise seemed like a voice that was trying to tell them a story, but they were unable to decipher it. As the night progressed, the sounds became clearer and more distinct. The friends heard shuffling footsteps in the darkness and hissing whispers that seemed to get closer. It seemed as if someone or something was moving through the shadows of the house. Rationally, they tried to ignore what was happening, but fear began to slowly eat away at them. As the night progressed, the house continued to create an environment that seemed like something out of a nightmare. The sound of the wind howling through the house's gaps was constant, and the wooden planks creaked beneath your feet, as if the house was trying to tell untold stories. Sarah, Emily, and David tried to convince themselves that the noises were just a result of the aging building and the night wind. Sitting at the dining room table, they shared stories and jokes to dispel the uneasy feeling that hung in the air. However, the mysterious sounds from the house continued to intensify. Indistinct whispers echoed through the corridors, as if the walls harbored dark secrets. Emily was the first to mention the noises. She frowned, looking around the room. "You guys are hearing this too, right? I'm not going crazy." Sarah and David exchanged glances, reluctant to admit that they were equally worried about the unexplained sounds. "It must be the old house and the wind," David suggested, although his voice betrayed nervousness. However, the feeling that they were not alone in the house persisted. Every noise seemed like a voice whispering a story they couldn't understand. Shuffling footsteps could be heard in the corridors, and indistinct whispers kept them awake. The house looked like an old book, full of untold stories. The restlessness increased as the night progressed. They decided to explore the house in hopes of discovering the source of the disturbing sounds. As they wandered the dark corridors, each room seemed to harbor a unique aura of restlessness. Shadows danced on the walls, as if trying to reveal hidden secrets. While investigating, the friends noticed that some paintings on the walls depicted unknown people. The portraits were old and appeared to have belonged to the house's previous owners. The eyes in the paintings seemed to follow their movements, and they began to feel watched. The kitchen, with its period appliances and rustic furniture, seemed frozen in time. As they opened doors and drawers, they found broken plates and rusty cutlery. The kitchen seemed a silent testament to a life that once existed in that house. They decided to go up the stairs towards the bedrooms, still looking for an explanation for the disturbing sounds. As she passed through a dark hallway, Emily felt like she was being watched. She stopped abruptly, her eyes scanning the darkness. However, there was nothing there. Sarah tried to reassure her. It must just be our imagination playing with us. Let's go back to the ballroom and try to have fun. But the beginning of that night was just the beginning of the nightmare that was about to unfold. The old house and its secrets still held much more than they could imagine. The night was just beginning, and the uneasiness in the air promised something more sinister and disturbing as the hours progressed. With every step they took in that mysterious house, the feeling that something was wrong seemed to intensify. The friends were determined to explore every nook and cranny in search of an explanation for the disturbing sounds echoing through the dark place. Sarah, Emily, and David climbed the wooden stairs, their footsteps echoing down the dark, narrow hallway. Each room they explored seemed to harbor a unique aura of restlessness. The shadows moved like living entities, playing with their minds. In the master bedroom, Sarah felt something strange in the air. It was as if the atmosphere was electrically charged, like before a storm. She stopped and looked around, but nothing seemed out of place. The curtains were drawn, and the light of the full moon peeked through the cracks. Emily, still nervous about the noises and shadows, murmured, "Come on, there's nothing here. It's just our imagination playing with us." Sarah agreed and walked back towards the door. However, as they approached the window, something unexpected happened. A dark, indistinct figure suddenly appeared in the corner of the room. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and a muffled scream escaped her lips. She backed away, colliding with Emily, who had also seen the apparition. The figure looked like a human figure, but its shape was obscure and indefinite. David entered the room, confused by the commotion. The words escaped his lips as his eyes met the sinister figure in the corner of the room. The apparition's eyes shone with an ominous light, like two distant stars in a night sky. The figure seemed to watch them with interest, as if studying the intruders in their home. It was impossible to discern any facial features or details, as its form was distorted and ethereal. Sarah finally managed to speak, her voice shaking. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" However, the shadowy figure did not respond. Instead, it began to dissipate, as if it was merging with the shadows in the room. The apparition faded before his eyes, leaving only the feeling that something terribly wrong was happening in that house. The friends remained paralyzed with fear for a moment, until the apparition finally disappeared completely. Emily was the first to regain her composure. "We have to get out of here, now!" They hurriedly left the room and went down the stairs, each step echoing in the dark hallway. The sounds in the house seemed to intensify, as if the apparition had triggered a series of supernatural events. Sarah, Emily, and David no longer had any doubts. Something inexplicable and terrifying was happening in that house, and they needed to find a way out. The presence at the window was just the beginning of a nightmare that seemed to have no end. They ran to the front door, desperate to escape whatever was haunting the house. The night outside was dark and rainy, but the darkness of the forest seemed preferable to the menacing presence they found in the house. As they left the house, the whispers and footsteps in the darkness seemed to follow them. The trio fled down the winding road, leaving the shadowy house and its unfathomable secrets behind. They had no answers, but they were certain that they would never return to that enigmatic house. Whatever they had witnessed and experienced that night would haunt their memories forever. The nightmare was far from over, and the trio realized that something supernatural and terrifying inhabited the isolated Airbnb house. They had entered a dark world that defied rational explanation, and the night still held unknown horrors. Sarah, Emily, and David continued running down the winding road in the dark of night, with the mysterious house slowly disappearing behind them. Fear still pulsed in their hearts, and they didn't dare look back, fearing what they might see. The sounds of shuffling footsteps and hissing whispers seemed to echo in their ears, even as they got further away from the house. It was as if the darkness of the forest held unfathomable secrets, ready to swallow them at any moment. Finally, after a desperate dash, they stopped in a clearing lit by the dim light of the moon. Emily, panting, looked at her friends, her face pale with terror. What the hell happened in there? That can't be real. David was equally distraught. I don't know, but I don't want to find out. That house is haunted or something worse. Sarah, despite the fear that still dominated her, tried to find some logical explanation for what they had experienced. There may be a rational explanation for all of this. Perhaps we suffered a group hallucination, or the house is so dilapidated that the sounds and shadows scared us. However, no rational explanation seemed enough to calm the fear that still consumed them. They knew something had happened in that house, something they couldn't explain. Emily finally managed to muster the courage to suggest, "We have to call the police or someone to investigate. We can't let other people fall into that trap." David agreed, and Sarah agreed, despite her doubts. They knew they needed to report what they had witnessed, even if it seemed unbelievable. As Emily picked up her phone to call the police, something made them flinch. The sound of footsteps shuffling through the foliage behind them broke the silence of the night. They turned slowly, fearing what they might find. In the darkness of the forest, they saw a shadowy figure, similar to the apparition in the house. Her eyes glowed with a sinister light, and she seemed to move toward them with an inexplicable purpose. Emily's scream broke the night's silence, and they ran once more without looking back. The shadowy figure chased them, its shuffling footsteps echoing in the dark night. They continued to run, the dense forest and the darkness of night closing in around them. The sound of footsteps behind them persisted, and fear drove them forward. Finally, after a desperate scramble that seemed to last an eternity, they emerged from the forest and reached the road. The headlights of a car approached, and they ran onto the road, waving desperately for help. The car stopped, and the driver, a local resident, looked at them with concern. Sarah, out of breath, managed to say, "Please help us. There's something in the forest, something terrible." The driver looked towards the dark forest, but saw nothing. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, then opened the car doors for the three friends. "Get in quick. I'll take you to a safe place." Sarah, Emily, and David settled into the car, still shaking and unable to fully explain what they had experienced. As the car drove away from the forest, they looked back, fearing something might emerge from the shadows. The dark night in the Airbnb house and the nightmare in the forest became an experience they would never forget. They survived, but the fear of the unknown would haunt them forever. The house, the apparition, and the secrets of that night would continue to haunt them, reminding them that the world hides unimaginable horrors,